Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast, where we tackle your toughest leadership challenges and share practical tools to help you lead with impact.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Coaching Table, a Humanergy Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Mimi Mitrius. Joining me today, we have co-founder of Humanergy and master coach, John Barrett, and Humanergy coach and Navy veteran, Quay Eady. Hey, John. Hey, Quay.
Hey, Mimi.
Hey, Mimi. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you both. Before we dive into a little bit more intro and then the scenario, I want to turn it over to you to see if you've got anything you'd like to say.
Well, excited for this opportunity. I'm glad to be working with Quay, and I anticipate some sort of bouncing ideas back and forth and some real nice builds together. With your help, Mimi.
Of course.
Absolutely super excited to be here and to share this with the world. I feel like coaching is such a great lane to enter into at all levels of your career. So I'm super excited to share today.
Great. Well, once again, thank you both for taking the time to be here. So Quay and John are hearing this scenario for the first time right now, so there's no prep and no script. They're going to explore what's really going on inside of this leadership challenge and uncover some powerful questions and hopefully some really valuable insights for our listeners. Today's scenario came from a leadership forum online. Sometimes we find these out in the world. They're real leaders, they're real situations posted anonymously in corners of the internet where people actually say what they're really thinking. So if you've got a scenario as a listener and you'd like our coaches to dig into it, you can submit that on the podcast page of the humanergy.com website, and we'd love to hear about what you're dealing with. The issue we're going to dive into today is something that we see a lot with Humanergy clients. So I was really happy to read such an honest take on this scenario. So here we go. 3 of my best ICs, or individual contributors, got promoted to lead roles in the last 18 months. All 3 are now struggling. They're visibly less engaged than before the promotion. They were promoted because they were exceptional at the work. The lead role requires them to stop doing the work and start managing the people doing the work. The traits I promoted them for, execution speed, technical depth, direct problem solving, are exactly the traits the new role doesn't use. I essentially promoted them out of their strengths, and now I'm managing 3 people who are very competent, but miserable in roles designed for a completely different type of person. And I'm not sure how to deal with this. So I'll let that sink in for a minute, John and Quay. And if you need me to read back anything, let me know. But I'd love to hear your initial thoughts.
So imagining that, we were with somebody who was sort of sharing that they're sharing that. I think what I would like to do as a coach is to really work with the person's thought process. And, one phrase that I've heard used to describe that is guided self-discovery, where the self-discovery is primary and the guiding is, what me as a coach brings to the table. And the idea being is because any solution or solutions or insights that get generated, the person has to own and they have to understand, because at the end of the day, they're the one who has to execute it in real life. And so that requires judgment and timing, which means understanding, and then they actually have to do it, which requires them to believe. And so, really working with their thinking. And so our Humanergy way is we like to start with questions. And so probably would start with a question, I imagine, would be something of the nature is like, so when this is successfully resolved and everybody has a smile on their face, what would that look like? Sort of describe that success.
To add on to that, Mimi, I feel like this may be a common issue in the workplace because there's a lot of time those rock star employees, those quarterbacks, they get promoted to coach. And so how do you go from quarterback to coach, from employee to manager, and then learn a new set of skills? I feel like the skills, as she mentioned, they were great at the job, they were fast to execution, and those skills that they mastered aren't really the skills that are needed for leadership. So I would suggest leadership training because they didn't wake up good at those jobs that they mastered that got them the promotion. They actually built those skills to get really good at that. So building the leadership skills that they need would be would be a way to move forward. And so what I would do is I would ask her what skills, I don't even know if it's her or him. So let me say them. I would ask them what specific skills do they need to improve on or what's missing, and then start the conversation there.
So taking that, and then I think I would add there's the how to do that, and then there's also part of the story, Quay, you probably heard this too, where I don't know if this person's sure that these people even want to continue in some ways, right? It was like I think the word miserable was used, and so I mean, a question to certainly put in there would be, to create a zone of safety and say, hey, how's it going? What are you experiencing? What's working for you? And this is the manager here now talking to the direct reports. What things are really a challenge? How was this what you expected and not expected? And just sort of provide a place for the person who's must be looking, acting, if not talking about being miserable, gets a chance to sort of say what's on their mind. Because depending on how they react to that, there's different paths, right? I mean, there's building and developing and growing path, which the training and being specific about that, and there's also the other end of it is the path of like, okay, maybe this wasn't the greatest idea, and you know what might be options, and then everything in between.
Yeah, I agree, John. It's definitely space for a transformative discussion, right? And so, what the manager can do also is sit down with the employee that was just recently promoted and find some common ground. You've been promoted into this role. It seems like you're miserable, as we've used before. What's the vision for this role? What's the vision for your career? You are an individual contributor. Where do you want to go in the organization? Is people management in the cards for you? And most people that are trying to grow their career, like managing people, is the next level. And how do we get them prepared for the role that they're already in? Because I don't know if backtracking would be the career move for most in this situation. So, how to develop the skills necessary to reduce the misery and increase the job satisfaction.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I mean, in a lot of organizations that I work with, they're good at getting people on the highway, but then they're not great at getting people or helping people come off the highway, so to speak, gracefully. Although that is potentially an opportunity for most organizations, I would offer that if they get good at both those, that actually would be great for everybody. Um, and also, in my experience, I would agree with you that more likely people are going to say, "Well, it's tough, and I still want to give it a go." The other thing that strikes me is, building off of what you were saying, Quay, is that this is, I mean, there's a guidance coaching of the direct reports, and there's a guidance coaching of this manager because, well, what this manager self-disclosed was, in a sense, well, reading between the lines was, hey, I promoted them, and I'm sort of just as surprised as everybody else that this isn't really working. So there's a development opportunity too for the manager, both in understanding how they got there, but also how they help somebody else untangle and, make lemonade out of the current lemons. So yeah, it's it's common, a little, it's challenging, and I think opportunity for growth for everybody.
I'm just going to go real quick because I want to just kind of recap what I'm hearing already, because I feel like this is just it's good insight from a foundational level, right? So we've got um we've got a couple of miserable people and probably an unhappy manager now as well. All because, we have promoted people who are really great doers, but not necessarily built for people management yet. And so there's an opportunity there for everyone. And Quay's point about, this is the next level, people want to make more money. And I think that that's something that we need to we need to highlight too, right? I mean, part of management and stepping into a new role means you make more money, but it also means you have to refine some skills or develop new ones that maybe you never had before. And I think everything that both of you are saying are like, they're great starting point questions for folks. Like, you know, where are we? What is making you miserable? What is your goal? What is your vision? Do you actually even want to stay in this position? I think all of that is a really rich place to start. So where do we go from there? What have you seen in your coaching?
So in my experience, when I've worked with an individual contributor that was promoted into management, some of the hurdles that they had to face was working with the people that used to be their peers and now being in charge of them. And so one of the questions that I always ask is, what relationship do you want to have with your team members, your direct reports that used to be your peers? What do you want that to look like? And after they kind of share what that looked like, ask them, have you shared that with your new team? Setting the expectation, delivering some non-negotiables. Hey, this is how we're going to work together. Kind of like the T's and C's of our partnership here at work. And then once they kind of get that outlined, it's almost like a roadmap to better relationships. This is how we're going to work together. This is how we're going to communicate. This is the expectations that I have for our team. And then people could get on board because it's like, hey, our new boss, they used to be our friend. They're not coming to crack the whip. They're actually trying to make us move faster, make better decisions, get the job done, increase performance, increase impact. That's what we're here to do. And once you kind of communicate that and get everybody on the same page, then seems start to move a little smoother. Because I could imagine that if, one of my peers became my boss, I would, that could bring up some emotion. Like, they're not going to tell me what to do. And it's like,
Especially
hey,
if you were just at happy hour with them, right?
exactly. And so it's like, hey, how do we thrive in this new relationship dynamic? And I feel like that's up to the leader to kind of set that stage, set the expectation, and then move forward from there.
So the build I would have, and I think it's a great point, and I do think, left untalked about, it can be really take way too long because people are second guessing and third guessing, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on in people's heads, and who knows whether it's going to be productively resolved or not. But it's um, so having that conversation. I think the ad I would have is making it a two-way conversation because both parties have to shift. There's the shift in terms of, okay, Quay, what's Quay need from me, and also what I need from Quay. And it's just like putting up the road signs or, the rules of the road such that, and the recognition that they're naturally different, but they're different and they're clear. And to your word, Quay, they're aligned. And so therefore we then have taken out a lot of unnecessary noise and ambiguity from the situation. And then that allows us to sort of navigate that key transition a lot better, which means that, we're not going to get it perfect, but the amount of not perfect is a lot smaller and a lot more manageable, and we're sort of set up for success with some level of confidence. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes, John. It makes me think about Humanergy's model of what great teams do great. Kind of starting off with that as a foundation to the conversation, that the dialogue that the new manager and the team should have. They could definitely just walk right through that framework and build that solid foundation to then build.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that in place, I'm going to go back to your point about, what it is that people need to develop and grow into. And one of the best tools that I've come across and I've used many times over the years with people is this simple format of what I call a from and a to. And it's essentially take a piece of paper, you put a line there in the middle, you've got from on the left hand column, you've got to on the right hand column, and you walk through with the person. In this case, the manager walks through with the direct report and say, okay, in your position that you did so well, right, and were recognized for, what were the thinking, the skills, the competencies, the key actions that you took? Like, okay, let's make a blueprint of what was your success. Now, let's do exactly the same process for what's the blueprint for success in this new role. Because typically what I find is while people understand it's not working, they don't necessarily have a great or clear picture of why it's not working and what's not working. The other thing that happens is that some of this, a lot of the skills that got them where they got to are going to need to continue. They're just going to need to be, in a sense, reshaped. So the fact that I'm really good at technical solutions. So in my old role, I was really good at giving and answering technical questions, but that technical skill now just needs to evolve from giving to asking, because it takes technical knowledge to ask the right question. And so you're able to sort of map out really clearly for somebody, hey, and all's not lost. You have this wonderful thing to build on, and you can keep these things, keep doing them. You can just modify from statement to question on these things. Oh, I can do that. And yeah, there's this one or two other additional areas where, this is going to be a work in progress. And, we can unpack that. But, just getting that clear for people. I've had lots of people who say, okay, can you capture that or I'll capture that? And we put it on a piece of paper, and that piece of paper becomes sort of like, the poster board at their desk that they reference, continues to sort of get them back to, okay, I'm on this journey. It's a journey of transformation. And that also allows them to recognize when they slip back and double down on what they're most comfortable with and, what they know, because quite often that choice causes a whole lot of derivative problems and challenges that makes their life even more miserable. I don't know. What do you think? Building on that, Quay.
Building on that, it makes me think about two things:
Yeah.
understand, then expand.
Mm-hmm.
So once the manager understands what's causing the misery, what's creating this discomfort in the workplace, how do we expand on the good things? How do we create more of what worked, just in a different from a different lens? I totally agree with you. Like, once you understand people's strengths, their weaknesses, then you can build a plan to almost leverage their strengths. And I always say, outsource your weaknesses.
Yeah, and you can for sure.
Yes. But no, I feel like that is a very, very valid.
I'd say too, just to add on, like the idea of from to and understand to expand, like both of those framings feel really hopeful. right? Like all of a sudden I have as an employee, as a newly promoted employee, like I feel like I have some hope because I can see a path forward now. And it doesn't necessarily feel maybe quite as heavy as it did because I have a clearer understanding of what I am really good at and how that can actually help me in this. Whereas before I'm like, man, I'm just imposter syndrome. I'm not qualified. All of the things running through my brain because I'm just failing at this new role because I don't understand fully how my strengths actually play into this new place. So I think from both of you, that framing is just really hopeful. So I sure hope that anybody who's listening really takes
Yeah.
away that.
And so you have the overarching like master plan, if you like, the from and the to. And, it doesn't, maybe it's 10 to 15 key things. And like you said, it does shrink down large misery to, you know, doable actions and development, etc. And there are some techniques that you can then use or some conversation you can have with people to even strengthen that. So, for example, let's say somebody looks at a from and a to and still feels like, oh, but that's me on the from column. I've heard that. That's who I am. Well, one of the more powerful things that I've learned and have used is you then take, in a sense, the from column that they have and say, you know what? You weren't always necessarily this from. Let's go back 5 years and put a from 5 years ago. And then say, 5 years ago, where, what was your thinking and what was your strength and success, etc. And what they'll see is that there's quantitative and qualitative difference between 5 years ago and today. And so the moral of the story is, well, geez, look at that. You went from here to here and, here to there.
Right.
And that, for a lot of people, is a really, really good reminder if they're stuck in that place. Another way that people get stuck is from the from and to. If the from and the to even still looks, you know, like a chasm. Um, and so then what I quite often will do is, in a sense, if I can metaphorically cut the from and to in half and then put from and to and then divide the space between the from and to into 3 columns. So, and say, okay, let's just break this journey now. Instead of it looking like it's one big leap, it sounds like it feels like you're just stuck and you're balking, at the at the jump. So what if we just break it down and the first column is things that seem easy and obvious and doable. Let's just put the easiest stuff in that first column in terms of change and things like that. Well, hey, I think I can take things that I'm good at and turn them into good questions with a little help. Okay, well, let's put that in column 1. Right. So let's imagine you've done column 1, right? Because you said that was sort of easy and you think you could do that. So let's just do that. Well, then you don't have to complete it, but if you say, okay, let's assume you've done column 1, what would go in column 2? So the idea again is you're taking the metaphorical elephant, this psychological elephant, and just sort of helping people break it down into doable. So I guess two things that I've encountered. One is this idea that I am who I am and that's me, and helping them sort of see that that's not as definite as they believe. And the second one is taking what they feel like is a large jump and breaking it down into smaller, maybe even baby steps. And maybe it's not 3 columns, it's 2 columns of steps. Maybe it's 5 columns, or maybe it's just 1. And let's come back in a week or two's time and see how it's going. So just some add-ons there.
Baby steps to the elevator. Did anybody see What About Bob?
One of my I recently watched that movie again, and it was just as good as the first time. 30 years. I kind of realized it was old. So what do you think, Quay? I know there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, there is. I really like that because when you can break things down, it makes it more digestible. And then you can take each step. And then once you have a little success there, that kind of creates some momentum to do the next thing. I really like that. Um, I will go back to the original poster and ask them what leadership characteristics did they see in those individual contributors that prompted the promotion. And in that analysis of the leadership characteristics that were obvious, how can we leverage those? How can we highlight them, illuminate them, so then that the individual contributor that was just recently promoted can lean into those to then help develop the rest that need to be developed. So just finding out what were those initial skills that implied they would be great for the position. Was it communication? I know they had the tech skills. I know they had, all of those hard technical skills. But what were some of the harder soft skills that they had that made them seem like they were a good fit?
I could see that going one or two ways or somewhere in between. I mean, the takeaway from that might be that there's a big development piece in that they were promoted based on their performance, not on their potential or their capability. Meaning that um, they were selected based on, they did a great job, they delivered, they delivered, they delivered, they delivered, and the person wasn't necessarily hiring for the next position. You know, and so that might be the takeaway is like, you know what, I think I made a mistake because it's a common mistake. You know, um, and so that would be, but then so that might be one takeaway, although it still leaves the issue of, well, these three people are promoted, so what can we do now to make them, you know, as successful as they possibly, as they possibly can be. But I really like leveraging the strengths, and making sure they don't lose sight of their strengths. And I would, again, come back. The strengths don't apply directly, but just need a little tweak, like going from giving an answer to asking the question, is a tweak. And if that turns out to be sort of a significant step, and that's something as a coach that you can, have repetitive practice on. You can literally ask the person, hey, identify 10 things that you would tell somebody what to do.
Mm.
Okay. Scenario. You're not going to tell them, you're going to ask a question that helps them come to, come to the answer. What would that question be? And, that sort of repetitive behavioral practice sometimes is that helps them get over that little hump of repurposing. Because if they go out of the room, this is the report, thinking, oh, okay, I need to repurpose my strength. When they get into the moment, the likelihood that they're going to be able to pull that off real time with real people spontaneously is probably close to zero. And so they do need some rehearsal and some practice and, to give them at least a fighting chance. And so that's again where coaching can help is, zeroing in on those things and then helping people have a fighting chance to practice.
Right. And the thing that stuck out the most of your um, comment right there was performance over potential.
Mm,
And it's like, how many times do we see people promoted for their pure performance? But the good thing about that is if they can perform well as an individual contributor, that means that the performance factor is there. They may just need to be aligned with the expectations of this leadership position you know? So if the performance was there, I feel like that is like a shining star. Like, hey, they can do things, they can do hard things. They just need to be aligned with the expectation of the hard things they're expected to do now.
hmm
Because one
Yep.
thing performers do is perform. High performers like to perform well, but they kind of have to know what the expectations are and what success looks like in this new role. Sometimes when you're promoted just from performance, you think, hey, I just need to do this job even better and then show other people how to do the job like I did the job. And that's partially true. And I think a challenge for the newly promoted person could be getting the rest of the team up to speed to perform at the level that they were. And then that may be a nice little transition into, stronger leadership skills with the powerful questions. So if I'm fast to execution and I have lots of momentum, asking the question, what could increase your momentum on this? What do you think you can do to increase your momentum on this? Where are you getting stuck? Where's the sticky point?
Well, you triggered a thought in my mind, and just slightly different words. You sort of said, getting them aligned on the new set of expectations. So that's sort of in the two column, right? It's like
Hmm.
the definition, in a sense, the KPIs for the two column are different than the KPIs for the from column. And so again, coaching conversation I had a number of times is, what was definition of suc- your definition of best? Because like you said, performers quite often they want to be the best. But the thing is that the definition of best it's shifted from the from column to the to column. So the definition of best in the from column is I have the best solutions, I get job done best, I get it done quickest, etc. Right? And so the common thing is it's all about me doing best, me solving, me. Now that's not saying it's selfish. I'm saying it's about how well I do. And so one of the key shifts is okay. So your new KPIs in your two column is you now need to be best at your people doing best. Right. And so, you know, you got an A before on that, but, that's not even the measure anymore, because quite often people are measurement oriented and so they want to be best, do best. And so it's just like, oh, well, what is the best? So best at now it's whatever it takes to have the best from my people. That's my best is the best from my people. Ah, and then whatever it takes for my people to do their best thinking, not me do my best thinking, they do their best thinking. And so having that sort of shift from, in a sense, a me to a us or a them, I found it also really super powerful in terms of, to your point, getting your head aligned around the right goal, and then the machinery, which they have, is now chasing the right thing.
Hmm.
Right? Because if that doesn't shift, they end up going back to chasing what they know, which is not good for them, and it's certainly not good for the new direct reports.
Yeah, it's not the job anymore.
Right? Exactly.
The job of leaders is to influence,
Hmm.
influence high performance from your team. And how you go about influencing your team requires you to know them, to have apply some emotional intelligence when it comes to understanding your people and what's going to motivate them and drive them and push them, and what's going to influence them to move in the direction that the organization wants to move into.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
so, not as a newly promoted manager or supervisor leader, my job is now to influence. And I feel like that is often not shared at the promotion party. But the new job is to truly influence, the thinking, the behaviors, the results that's going to move our team into hyper.
So again, it's making that two column, right? That picture, that blueprint, come alive for the person in a way
Hmm.
that is meaningful, and it's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So a couple of thoughts on that to sort of, how do we get that to come alive for somebody? So I have two thoughts. One is, once you've got a sort of a growing blueprint of what the new good looks like or the new great looks like, it's like, okay, it's different than how you were successful before, but are there places in your life that you do any and all of these things? So what I have found is that even though a person might be an individual, super individual contributor at work, they, and it's not all the time, but they may be, a great mum or a great dad or, where you learn pretty quickly you don't control squat and you need to work through influence, for example. Or they might be, a Girl Scout leader or a Boy Scout leader. Or, I mean, maybe there's some part in there, where they don't realize it. They haven't connected the dots, but they've done those things at times. And so it's just like taking that from being like a secondary thing that I do in a certain setting and saying, you know what, you sort of worked out at least some of this. So let's pull that through. And how do we, to your point, expand and strengthen and affirm and take it from a small role to being like the star role. And so, that's sort of, one key idea. And in my excitement, I lost the other key idea. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I do remember the second one. The other one is, as you look at this 2 column, right, this blueprint, is there somebody that you really respect that you think does a great job of this? Again, you're tapping into, what I have found is the more you can tap into stuff that already exists, that the person has experience of, whether it's direct or even if it's just observational, it saves a lot of work, the unnecessary work, because it's sort of not quite a cut and a paste, but it's just there. It just needs to be activated and wired, And so, oh yeah, I had this great leader, and then what did they do that was so great? And they did this and this and this and this and this, and then what impact did they have? And so you're just like fanning that flame, and it just takes off. Imagine that you didn't do that, and you're trying to teach them all that, or you're trying to build that from scratch. It's like, that's such a painful and unnecessarily painful big job to do. So anyway, just a couple more thoughts.
I totally agree with that, John. It makes me think of, you know, if we were talking about basketball players, like who's your Kobe, who's your LeBron, who's your MJ? What about them do you want to, bring into you? You understand they have all these great attributes, characteristics, habits. How can you expand that into your world?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That whole understand and expand, I promise you, it is a life changer. But once you can understand the qualities and good things about someone you admire, honestly, the only reason why you can admire them is you recognize them because they're in you already.
Yeah.
Then how can you expand them out into this new?
Yeah, I agree. I also want to take something that you said that I think is important, but it's on the flip side. So, and again, as needed, but sometimes it's grabbing the from, but you can't grab the from until you let go of the to. Right? And we love the to. Sorry, you got to grab the to, you got to let go of the from. Sorry. But we love the from. We were good at it. We've been practicing it. We got rewarded for it. Everybody said we're awesome at it. And we're going to the to, where it's like, I may not be going back to kindergarten, but I'm going back a couple of grades. Right? So I got to get excited about Kobe or LeBron or whoever. And to some degree, I also maybe need some help letting go of from. And so to use your analogy, it might be, well, think of a basketball player who was really, really good, but wasn't a team player. And it sort of really caused problems. Oh yeah, and I don't know basketball well enough, but but it's like, oh yeah, I played with this guy. He was great, but he was the worst person to have on your team. Everybody hated to have him on your team because he just wasn't a team player. He just wasn't whatever. It's like, okay, so sounds like, you know, that. So my point being is you want to activate the two, but some ways you got to almost like help the person buy into letting go of or deactivating the from, right? Because they
Mhm.
realize what might have served them. It's a liability to some degree if they carry it forward.
Yeah, that popped something in my mind from one of my old mentors. They told me to grab onto something new, you gotta let go of what's old.
Yeah.
So, we sometimes have a grip so tight on the way life is and what was so great about it that we're afraid to let go and let something more powerful or more magical come into
Hmm.
our hands. And it is truly about letting go of that from and reaching out towards
Hmm.
that too. And it's
Yeah.
like when we reach out towards it, it meets us halfway. You know what I mean? And so I totally love this analogy of from to to, you know. That's beautiful.
So I've got something for you guys in as we're kind of nearing the last few minutes of our time together. I want to zoom out from this scenario as we've kind of been looking at it for kind of on that more granular level. And I'd like to zoom out and ask you both, what does this scenario maybe suggest about the overall organizational culture? Because we've got three people that have recently been promoted that are now miserable in their role, and the manager who promoted them, who maybe didn't recognize a correct fit for a promotion, or maybe timing was off, or I'm sure there's something there that I think you probably have some thoughts about, and I'd love to hear them.
Well, I guess I think you sort of the suspicion that you have, or the in the insight that you have, that there's more to the picture is spot on, and that is likely that there is, a cultural and structural and process, like a larger picture to this around this scenario. Because in real life, it's unlikely that a manager promoted three people without some input from you know HR and or bosses, etc. And so it does speak to. So it's more likely that um, a common scenario would be, hey, this organization does really well on performance KPIs. Performance KPIs are very dominant, and the whole idea of thinking about potential and capability for the next role, you know, is an afterthought at best, and that in fact this is the latest case study in this organization. There's some exceptions, but it's more the rule than the exception that this sort of thing tends to happen. And so then that does speak to um, an over prevailing mindset that exists, and it also means it's probably built into the you know the performance management system and how it's used. And so there are some things that would be worthwhile either identifying, hey, is this like a one-off thing, or is this sort of like, a pattern? And if it is, then let's look at this more systemically, and, let's look at, what's the typical performance management process, both what's on paper, but also what's the common practice of performance management. And, are we creating the probability of this happening more often? Um, and then there's a whole big conversation you have when you start talking about organizational level systemic factors and how you change those, et cetera, way beyond the scope of this. But I think you're spot on in terms of, you know, is it, a symptom of a larger process?
Yeah, for me, I can see a couple different lanes kind of showing up. One, maybe the company is growing really fast and they're just promoting people internally that aren't really ready for the role because they haven't had leadership training. Another lane could be there's really high turnover and they're backfilling for positions that's been empty. So in both cases, I feel like the organization is not preparing the pipeline for leadership. There is something missing to where the people that are ready to promote aren't really ready to promote because they haven't been trained on how to lead the team. So we can either be growing really fast and promoting people internally and like moving faster than our leadership training can keep up with, or turnover's really high and we're just trying to plug people where we need people to be if they're ready or not. And so a solution that could really help both lanes is to prepare the pipeline. We all know that, I mean, I worked in corporate for 15 years. There's succession planning that happens. In that succession planning, are we training the bench with leadership skills and capabilities so when the time arises to promote them, they are partially ready, if not fully ready? Where's the training? How are we preparing the pipeline? Is it an organizational policy? Is that our culture to make sure people are ready for their next role? And if not, then we end up with situations like this where they get into a management position and they're miserable. And this could be a slippery slope because what if those three people leave? And now we got to, vote people that weren't ready for that role into the next role, you know? But I do feel like the internal hires is a good sign because that means that the organizations believe they have good people there. But good people need training too.
So the moral of the story is leadership development equals high employee retention rates.
Yes. And people ready for the next role. Role readiness should be a department somewhere to make sure because turnover is going to happen. Nobody has 100% retention rate. Somebody may hit the mega millions, hit the lottery and leave. Or do we have the redundancy in the building? Is someone ready? And I feel like every organization should make sure that their people are ready for the next role.
Right. Well, if anything from today's conversation got any of our listeners thinking, that is kind of the point. If your organization could use this kind of thinking in real time, that's what we do here at Humanergy. Go ahead and head to humanergy.com to learn more about our coaching, our leadership development work. We can definitely help you develop those leadership pipelines. And if you have a specific leadership situation you'd like us to work through on a future episode, submit it on our website. We will keep it anonymous. Please keep your situations real, and we'll take it from there. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, John. Thanks, Quay.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Quay. Thanks, Mimi. Thanks.
You guys are great.
That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe and visit humanergy.com for many more resources.